There's also the level of
recording in progress.
The way you have the dibur, the speech, which is outside of the person, that's similar to the written letters. You have the oisius, the way they are in the person, in the person's machshava. Even in the person's machshava, the oisius are necessary over there. You cannot have any type of thought without any oisius over there, because the oisius is from the word asa boiker, that it's about revelation, it's about coming down, but it's not in the machshavas, in machshava, the seichel itself, before even consciously thinking and using language in the mind, before speech even, the letters are not something that are felt as a separate entity, and therefore they're like the letters of engraving that are in the very body of the precious stone, not like the letters of writing, that the ink is something separated from the parchment. This is all the Rebbe is bringing in to be able to understand the concept of, by us, in our world, what's the idea of bechukoisai, the level of chkika in the amelim b'Torah, that you have the idea of learning Torah in such a type of way, that's in a way of amelim b'Torah, that you're toiling in Torah in a way of chakika. So we have to explain the different types of ways how there's chakika in the nefesh. The way there's engraving in the nefesh itself, there's the level of engraving as well. So we are holding on the fourth page of the Maimer, page Ches, second paragraph, line 12. Omnam, so the Rebbe goes on to say, yet, the analogy of letters of engraving is not exact. It's not fits totally to the idea of the thinking of the idea itself. When he's preoccupied with the idea, and the idea is like so brilliant in his mind that he's not even aware of the language that he's saying, like we mentioned yesterday. Although the letters that are in the thought of the idea itself, they are one entity with the idea, like that's why they are likened to the letters that are engraved. It's still not appropriate to say about them that they are one entity with the soul. The soul is itself is higher than the power of intellect. The power of intellect is only one of the many soul powers, and it's a limited soul power, and so on. If we're going to talk about that it's nechkak, that it's engraved in the person, not just engraved in the idea, but the letters are engraved in the person, so you need to go further and higher than just saying it's engraved and one with the idea. So he says, how do we know that it has to be engraved with the person himself? So he says, since the pasuk says, in my chukim, mine, it's talking about Hashem's chukim, shu inyan hachkika shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that what we're attaining over here, we're supposed to reach over here, is the engraving of Hashem's type of engraving. It's not the engraving of our limited engraving of our intellect. There has to be an engraving that's similar to Hashem. So therefore, the similarity and the corresponding level of this in a person's nefesh, has to be not just in the intellect, but rather concerning the soul itself, similar to what is by Hashem, that Hashem is not limited to, let's say, an external type of level. When something is engraved and joined with Hashem, it's in the very essence. So he says, we could say, line 21, that something that's an example of the engraving, like it is by Hashem, is an example of this. It's from the power of intellect, the way it's concealed in the nefesh, before that power of intellect comes out, revealed in the chachma and so on. Also over there, in the power of intellect, the way it's still concealed within the nefesh itself, there are the letters that accompany it that are joined with the intellect. Since we're talking about the intellect, the way it's hidden and concealed and joined with the soul itself, also the letters are joined with the nefesh, similar to the letters that are engraved, that are completely engraved, not just engraved in the intellect itself. So now the Rebbe is going to connect this back with the idea of Torah study. We want to have this concept concerning Torah study, and Torah study seems to be the opposite. You have to speak the words. Speaking is, like we said, like written letters. Ois Daled, line 25, we still have to understand the connection and the association between you shall go and my chukim. It's the idea of letters that are engraved. Concerned to Torah study, that's the idea of you have to be toiling in Torah. Torah study has to be specifically in letters of speech, like we said before. Let alone Torah Shabbal Peh, that a person does not fulfill the obligation of studying Torah Shabbal Peh without actually enunciating and verbalizing the words. In Torah Shabbal there's also that importance, even though in both Torah Shabbal and Torah Shabbal Peh, we also have the idea of enunciating, and that's how we fulfill the mitzvah. Seemingly, what's the connection between speaking words of Torah with the letters of engraving? It's referring to the letters, the way they're in the essence of the soul, way beyond even intellect itself. So it's the furthest possible distance of speech to the essence of the soul. So how do we connect it? Amelim b'Torah, which means practically you have to be speaking words of Torah, and you're talking about it being engraved. Essentially, what the Rebbe is going to explain is obviously the idea of Notes, Cholos, and Besoifon, that you have the lowest level is rooted in the highest level. Line 30, this will be understood according to what's explained in the Geras HaKodesh of Tanya, being Abba, concerning the level of Abba, which Abba is Chachma. Now, when we talk about Chachma, it could be Chachma, normally could be talking about Chachma of the world of Atzilus. But the Rebbe doesn't stop over there. He says, not just the level of Chachma. That's in Seder Ishtalshalos, is referred to over here in this Geras HaKodesh that we're going to explain. Also, the Chachma that's beyond Seder Ishtalshalos, I guess that's similar to what he said before. Not just Seichel itself has the Oistachike, but the Seichel, the way it's concealed in the Nefesh. So perhaps the corresponding level to what he spoke about before, about the Seichel, the way it's concealed in the Etzem of the Nefesh. So you have the level not just of Chachma, the way it's the revealed level of Chachma, Seder Ishtalshus, but you have the Chachma, the way it is higher than Seder Ishtalshus. Top of page 10. So the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, Abba Yosad Barata. It's a Lashon Zohar that Abba, the Chachma, even Chachma is higher than Seder Ishtalshus, is the foundation, founded the daughter. What does that mean? So the Rebbe says in the parentheses, Chachma hi hayisoid la'oisis. Chachma is the foundation for letters. Shenikru brata bas, letters is called barato, which is the Aramaic for the word daughter. Bechinas hamalchus, the level of malchus is the level of letters, and that's where it comes from, as we know. Basara Amoris Nivra Olam, that those 10 utterances that came from Malchus, because B'dvar Melech Shulton, the whole idea of a king rules by his speech. So the level of Malchus has to do with the level of speech. So Chachma, Abba Yosef Brata means Chachma, even the highest levels of Chachma, higher than Seder Ishtalshus, is the basis, the source, the foundation for the letters, for language, which we're talking about the whole time over here, about the shoyrish of letters in the etzem. That the coming into being, the Alter Rebbe explains, of the letters of speech, it's not through movement of the lips. That when I move my lips in a certain way, that creates certain letters. That's not how it works, even though it may seem that way. But Alter Rebbe explains and similarly, not just the lips, but we know that there's 4 other enunciators where letters come out from in the mouth. There's the teeth, there's the tongue, there's the palate, there's the throat. So one may think that the letters are created by those things, but it's not. How do we know? So the Alter Rebbe explains, and the Rebbe brings down the brackets. The soul does not intend and know at all to focus and to have intention to move the different parts of the mouth. So in other words, there are the letters, for example, Beis, Vav, Mem, and Fei, that the lips are responsible for. The person that is saying one of those letters is not aware whatsoever how exactly he's moving his lips. And there's no intention. I'm going to move my lips in this way, that's going to pronounce a Beis. If I move my lips in that way, it's going to pronounce a Mem, etc., etc. There is no intention, there's no awareness. And even more so, if you ask a regular, healthy person that had no problem with speech issues, etc., what particular way do you move your mouth when you need to pronounce a certain letter, the person won't know. The person will need to think and figure it out and maybe put their hands on their mouth to see where it moves. They wouldn't know it. Why? Ela adrab, because it's not coming from, it's not that the lips or the other 4 enunciators are the ones that are creating the letters. Ela adrab, but just the opposite. Shinui hatnuas shebesvasayim b'chul. The different movements in the lips and the other enunciators, it comes and it's created from the change in the will of the soul to express either this letter or a different letter. In other words, all I know is that I want to say the letter Beis, and then the lips will follow the will that my nefesh has. So we see that the letters are not formed or not created and do not originate from the mouth. It's just the opposite. They originate from the will, meaning they originate from deep down in the nefesh. This is the whole point that he's going to talk about, the root of the oasis in the nefesh. They originate deep down the nefesh, and therefore, because they originate in the deep down way in the nefesh already will direct, and the will direct the lips to move in a certain way. And then the Alter Rebbe also over there gives further example. In line 9, this is even more evident in the vowels, and how we express the vowels. When the will of the soul is to express the vowel sign of a kamatz, then automatically the lips become constricted. That's the word kamatz, from the word constrict. And the lips have to constrict to be able to give forth the kamatz sound. The same thing, the meaning of the word patach is that it's opening up the lips when you say a patach. Not that the person thinks to himself, I want to open my lips or I want to close my lips so I can express a kamatz or a patach. So therefore, where do these come from? Where they originate from? If they're not originating from the lips or the mouth, Ella, the Rebbe goes on line 12, Al Mifta Isis Vanakudis, the expression of the letters and the vowel signs. Is from the concealed intellect. And the intellect, the way it's in its most early state, that's in the speaking soul. And not only does it come from the intellect part that's buried deep inside the soul, but Chassidus says that really letters are sourced even higher than the intellect that is associated with them. They come even from the hidden intellect, but rather they come from the soul itself. There's an expression that the soul is filled with letters. Like the well-known expression of Arabei Marnesim, Yechida shebenefesh shenkt oisies. Yechida, the deepest, highest level of neshama, gives forth, it gifts the letters, from the word like a present. So now, based on this deep source of where letters actually come from, according to this, now it's understood the connection between the letters of speech that you use in learning Torah to the idea of engraving. Because specifically the root of the letters of speech is in the essence of the soul. Whereas, Chassidus in other places says, Seichel is not that deeply rooted. Midas is not that deeply rooted. Only Malchus, only speech, only letters have a higher source than the intellect itself. So now we can connect it with the beginning of the idea of B'chukai. He says in line 21, according to this, we understood the idea that the Torah says, if you will go in my chukim, you should be toiling in Torah. And how to apply that by an ordinary person. The way this topic and this idea of the Chukai says by every single Yid, even ordinary people, and when they establish set times for Torah study, kol chad from shiur delay, every person according to their measure and capability. So where do we see this idea of the Chakika? The Kivin Yisrael, Miskashrim by Raisa Chulu, since Yidden are bound up with the Torah. Yisrael Mikashrim Etzem Shalahem, top of page Yud, when Yidden bind up their essence. Shesham Hu Shoyrish Aisa Dibra Shabbat Kvishem Baifin Shachakika, that over there their essence is the root of the letters of speech in Torah. The way the letters are in the essence, they're in a way of being engraved. So they connect their letters, which is part of their essence, ima etzem b'chinas hakika the Torah, with the essence of the Torah in the engraved part of the Torah. How do they attain that? How do they reach such a level? Through that their entire existence and being is the toiling in Torah. So because their entire existence and being is toiling in Torah, so therefore they attain and connect their essence and their Hakika with the Hakika and essence of the Torah. So then it becomes by them the traveling. You shall go to the level of engraving of above. There's an expression that says that Hashem engraved an engraving, he chiseled out in the supernal purity of above. So we see that by Hashem, it's brought down in Kabbalah terminology, there's also a level of engraving. What is the level of the engraving in the supernal brilliance and purity? Bechinas HaKeser, that's the level of Keser. The 10 spheres, the way they are in Keser, are considered concealed. Similar to the soul powers, the way it's concealed in the nefesh. That's higher in the letters of writing. The 10 spheres of Atzilus is similar to the idea of the letters that are in writing. So he says in Hey, according to what we just now said, we need to understand what it says further, that the earth will give forth its produce. The l'chura seemingly since the idea of engraving, you shall go in my chukim, is in the essence of the soul beyond the intellect. Even the intellect, the way it's in the power of the maskil, in other words, the way the intellect is hidden in the soul. As the idea of the engraving is even higher than the will. That the level of will above, the similarity to will by us is, and above is the level of keser, arich va'atik v'chulum. So since the chakika is so high, how is it possible the reward is that the earth will give forth its produce? Earth, we know, goes on Malchus Datzilus. Shamayim is Eishon Mayim that's going on Gvura, and Chesed is going on the Midas Datzilus. Oretz is going on Malchus Datzilus, Shibechinas Achrein Shabbatzilus. It's a final level of Atzilus. So how do we say that the reward for this highest, most level is seemingly going to be from such a low level? So it says in line 19, Nachayinyan, who the idea behind this is, in truth, it's possible to have an ascent above, even higher than the letters of engraving. This idea that we said, that he engraved an engraving in the supernal purity, this is still the root of the Kalim. Also concerning the hidden and concealed 10 spheres, and where they are higher than Atzilus. That the idea of the concealed 10 spheres, there are 3 different metaphors given for that in Chassidus. Beginning from the metaphor of when a flame is still hidden within a coal before it comes out, and then there's other mishalim for it. So it's mevur, but it's explained that these spheres agnuzas, what are they a root for? What are they a source for? They are only the root for the vessels that come out afterwards. Therefore, there are 10 spheres in these spheres agnuzas. They are 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11, because they are only the kalim, and in kalim you could limit it and say it's only this much and not more. As opposed to the lights, they are without definition. It's impossible to limit them. Top of page there's no comparison between the vessels and the lights. So therefore, we are talking about going higher than Kalim. After it says, with the idea of engraving. It says, it says the earth will give forth its produce. That is even higher than the letters of engraving. To arrive at that, you need specifically Malchus, the level of Eretz, the earth. Why? Because Shesharsha, the root of Malchus, is Lamaila Mikol Spheres, beyond all the spheres, Bechinas Reisha, Lo Yisyada, the head and the top that's not known. Though Malchus itself is primarily vessels. It says that Chachma is primarily light and the vessels is very minimized, and Malchus just the opposite. It's primarily vessels and the light is practically not there. And at least it's not the idea of lights. Because Malchus has nothing of its own, which the lights indicate. So it's all about being a vessel, all about receiving. Because of its root in a way of a head that's not known. It's beyond the vessels and beyond the lights. And to reach that level, it comes after being prefaced by observing the mitzvahs, not just the idea of the Isach Kike, because it shows on the study that's for the sake of observing, fulfilling. Because the greatness of Torah studies that it brings to action. The action affects an advantage and an elevation in the study, that the actual study should be great. That the action adds greatness to the study. Because through study alone, all we reach is the level of engraving. Only through action, which is connected with Malchus, we reach the very essence that's beyond the letters of engraving. So now we're going to go back to the original thing about the Bris Rishonim. So he says, this will be also understood, where it says, I will remember for them also the bris, the covenant of the early ones that we said before. It's talking about elevating the shvatim to the most highest levels, even higher than Atzilus. By prefacing, since the level of the Rishonim, the early ones, is a very high level. It's not understood what's the need for a bris, a covenant. It's explained in one more. What's the idea of a covenant? When you have two friends, that they make this bris between them, so that even when their love stops, even if logically and rationally there should have been a stop to the love, the bris keeps them together. The covenant keeps them together. So therefore, when is there a necessity for a bris? When you're dealing with a low level, when there's a possibility for separation. Top of the last page. But on such a high level, like the level of the early ones, it's not understood what need is there for a covenant. It's not chas shalom going to come apart. But the explanation this is according to what's explained previously. Also, the most highest level of the letters of engraving. That's the 10 concealed spheres, is only the level of Caleb. There also has to be the ascent to the level of the lights until you ascend to the essence. So too concerning the bris of the early ones, even though it's a very high level, there are still higher levels to go up even to the essence, and that's what you need to have the bris for. This is the end of the Maimer. This is all they had transcribed.